All right, welcome back to the podcast. My guest today is one of my favorite writers, Jared Dillian. You know him, you follow him. He's been on the podcast before. He is on Twitter as the Daily Dirt Nap. He has written his fourth book. It's a phenomenal book. So I want to talk about that. We're going to talk about some Substack stuff that he's written, including Being Hungry Like the Wolf. Jared, how you doing? Thanks for coming.
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Good to talk. Let's kind of kick it off a little bit with No Worries, right? No Worries, How to Live a Stress-Free Financial Life. I thought this was really interesting because it's a personal finance book, which is a little different from the stuff you've written before. But what I found most interesting was you didn't really focus on the X's and O's. You focused on the stress, the psychological aspect of it, which I think is, really the bigger issue for most people. How did you come to write about the stressful part of financial planning and personal finance?
Well, I started preparing for this book about 5 years ago. I would go into bookstores and look at the personal finance books on the shelf. And invariably, it was like 10 easy ways to become a millionaire and stuff like that. And, I had a radio show for 2 years and I would take calls. And what I started to develop this theory around the idea that a lot of the personal finance experts out there tell people to do things which will result in them having the most money, but will also cause them a lot of stress, right? And I was like, maybe the goal isn't to have the most money. I'm sure you're familiar with the book, The Millionaire Next Door, right? The book continues to sell after like 30 years. It's still one of the best-selling books on Amazon. And what the book talks about is it goes through all these vignettes of a guy that lives in a neighborhood in a tiny house, in a 1,200 square foot house, and he's got a 16-year-old car, and he's got one cheap suit, and he's got 7 figures in the bank, right? So the premise of the book is there are these millionaires all around you that got to $1 million by cutting expenses, okay? And I said, that is possible. You can get to a 7-figure bank account just by being a cheap fuck all the time, but it's not a lot of fun. You know what I mean? It's really not a lot of fun, and it causes you a lot of stress. And in the United States, we kind of have this mythological person that has a 580 credit score and they have a $100,000 truck and they maxed out their credit cards. And we say, this is what America is. America is a bunch of sybaritic debt monkeys that like maxes out their credit cards and just they're spending addicts. And those people exist, but there are actually not that many of them. There's not that many of them. What we have more of is people who spend too little, right? So really the book is about balance. The book is about balance in between spending too much and spending too little and taking too much risk and taking too little risk. And it's really about this middle path that nobody ever talks about. The personal finance experts, Dave Ramsey, Susie Orman, they preach extreme solutions, right? So for example, Dave Ramsey says, cut up all your credit cards. Well, that doesn't make a lot of sense for a lot of people, and that's an extreme solution. But extreme solutions are very easy to understand and they're very easy to sell, right? What's hard to sell is a more nuanced solution that says, hey, maybe the credit cards aren't the source of your problem. Maybe it's really your psychology that's the source of the problem, and that's really what you need to work on. So anyway, I talked a lot, but that's basically what the book is about.
Yeah, and again, just focusing on, the psychological, even the mystical ways to deal with personal finance. Like, you talk about how a lot of those stress issues that people have about money is self-inflicted. What does that mean?
Well, for example, when we talk about risk, if people are experiencing a lot of stress in the capital markets, it's definitely self-inflicted. It's because you bought GameStop and Dogecoin and Nvidia, you know what I mean? And you're staring at your phone like every 5 minutes, like checking your portfolio, and you experience all these emotions. You're happy, you're sad, you're happy, you're sad. And it's this volatility that is causing you stress, right? So in the book, I talk about some ways to mitigate that stress. But every every personal finance problem is self-inflicted. It's about how you structure your financial life, right? So it's these are all decisions we make.
And you focus on what you choose to focus on. You talk about that, how you can choose to see it in a stressful way. You can choose to kind of reframe it.
Yeah, and one of the things I talk about in the first chapter of the book is that we all get to choose how much money we have, right? How
So,
much how much
yeah.
how much money we have is a choice. It's absolutely a choice.
So I can sense, half the audience rolling their eyes at that. But, unpack that. What does that mean?
Well, a lot of people work in a job, they get paid $60,000 a year, and they're like, I make what I make. But there's a lot of things that all of us can do to make more money, even me, right? So, even you, there's things you could do to make more money, and you don't do them because either it's too much work, or it's risk, or it's
Fear of failure.
stressful, or, you know,
Fear,
so
fear of failure is a big one.
fear of failure, yep. So, but you can get a raise, you could get another job, you could get a second job, you could work longer hours, you could start a business on the side, you can do passive income. These are all things that people can do to make more money. And, most of the personal finance advice that's out there is focused on taking this pie that you have and slicing it into smaller and smaller pieces. And what I'm saying is you can just go make more pie, you know? Like if you're cutting expenses and you want to scrounge up an extra 2 or $3,000 a year, that's going to be really hard and it's not going to be a lot of fun. But what is fun is actually making more money. So,
I mean, I've seen this in my life, in my network, my friends and family, where people will stress so much about, you know, uh, should they or should they not get this car, which is maybe $200 a month more or less than the next one. But when it comes to talking to their boss about a raise, that instead of the $200 a month could get them 5,000 a month compounding over the next 20 years, they don't want to think about the revenue side of their personal ledger, just the debit side. I think it's just something people aren't used to doing, or they feel like
yeah.
they need to wait for permission to do. And I really appreciate it in the book where you talk about, like, hey, there's more, there's more juice to squeeze out of lemon on the revenue side than there is trying to be cheap on the expense side.
Yep, absolutely.
Now, I heard that you wrote this book. You wrote two-thirds of the book in 2 weeks. Is that right? Is that possible?
3 weeks, 3 weeks.
What was the
Yeah.
muse? What was the,
Actually, it was 2 weaks. It was 2 weeks, yeah.
so how did
Um,
that come to be?
so I had been preparing to write this book for a while. Like I said, I was on the radio for 2 years. I had all these thoughts, I had all these ideas, and I was on break from school in 2021 over Christmas break, and I didn't have anything to do, so I just sat down and I just started writing. And like you said, I had 2/3 of the book written in 2 weeks, and I finished it up about a year later. I had a trip to the Cayman Islands and I finished it up. So,
So 2 years to contemplate, hear the stories, to think about, to let it resonate, and then 2 weeks to chop it out.
yeah, yeah,
It it,
yeah.
it kind of brings me to a conversation that we had a while ago, a couple of years ago. But it really meant a lot to me. You had sent me a text and said, "Hey, my Substack is very sporadic. I get moments of inspiration every month or two, and I write, I try to write these, epic, like, posts that are going to last a long time. I don't know how good I am at it, but that's my goal. But then I have long periods where I'm like, I haven't written in a month. I'd like to write something, but I don't. If I don't have that, like, fire in the belly inspirational moment, it's very hard for me to write content. And you said, "Hey, you doing any subject?" I said, "Yeah, I just feel like I got nothing to say at the moment." And you said to me, and I'll never forget this. You said, "Yeah, well, as far as it relates to you, I'm a newspaper man. I have deadlines. I'm a newspaper man. Like, your job is to sit there and write. You got to write. It's part of what you do. If I'm going to say it's one of the things that I do, then, sit down and write, suck it up and write."
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, what I'd like to say about that is, I think a lot of people have cause and effect reversed. I think most people think they get inspiration first and then they write. I write and then I get inspiration. Okay. So Like, I'll have an idea for something to write, like on a Substack or something, and it's not very well thought out. I just sit down and start writing, and I get the inspiration while I'm writing, right? So, literally, my writing process is number one, turn on the computer, number two, open Microsoft Word, and number three, start typing. Like, that's how I write. And the inspiration comes while I'm writing. It's kind of recursive.
How do you manage distractions?
I have the TV, I have cats, I have email, stuff like that. Like I have distractions, but um most of my creative writing I do at night. I would say between 7 and 10 p.m. So, aside from the cats, there's like fewer distractions. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, I wonder how much of this on like I've always been slightly ADHD, but I think Twitter has really, really negatively impacted I mean, I've got some things I've written, white papers and, long form. Now it's hard. It's hard for me to read. It's hard for me to write long form stuff. It's all just boom, 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 little hits. And I mean, I love Twitter. I love all that, but I don't know, man. I think to sit and have the clear head and the space and the time and the just the attention to be able to sit and write long form like you're able to do is just something that eludes me. I mean, any tips you can give me, anything you could say about, how to get into that mindset?
well, I mean, it's funny you mentioned Twitter because I've been spending a lot less time on Twitter, so that I can focus on my long form writing. Because, like you said, it has a negative effect. Um, and also, like, there's a lot of negative emotions associated with Twitter. Like, you tweet something and you have these randos, like these assholes that are just like being dicks to you and stuff. And then you get emotional about it and it sort of takes you away from that space where you can write. So I don't spend as much time on Twitter anymore.
Yeah.
I find it to be a source of frustration most of the time. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely something I think worth considering. There's some great things about Twitter. I mean, I love the medium, but there are, like everything else, there's a cost, right? And
yeah.
all right, let's talk about playing the tuba. So this was one of the chapters in your previous book, Those Bastards, that I love and that I've talked about a lot, because it articulates something that I think I've known or felt and had a hard time saying. My brother Arye Bak says something similar, and when I wrote up your playing the tuba thing, I talked about that. He talks about wire hangers, but um, why don't you explain what playing the tuba means in the context that you wrote about?
Well, I mean, the tuba is a real thing. So, uh, what if you're in high school, if you're in elementary school, you have a kid that wants to play music. Usually the parents go for the cheaper instruments. They go for the clarinets and the flutes and the trumpets. I don't know how much they cost right now, but back in the 80s, they would be like $300, right? So they were the cheaper instruments. But a tuba was like $3,000. So there's not that many parents that are going to buy a tuba for their kids. So what happens is you get to school and everybody's playing flutes, clarinets, saxophones, and trumpets, and you have this band that it sounds like a kazoo band. It's like very buzzy, like because it's all woodwinds, because those are the cheaper instruments that the kids can afford. And when these kids apply to college, like colleges look for musicians and you have a million clarinet players applying for college and they can only take the best one. But if you're a tuba player, if you've been playing tuba since elementary school, you are going to get that scholarship, right? You're going to get a scholarship for playing tuba. You will have a job your entire life. It's actually the same in rock bands. Like everybody wants to play the guitar, but nobody wants to play bass. So if you can play bass, you always have work. You always have a job, right? So really what that piece was about was, you know, everybody wants to go into banking, everybody wants to go into tech. You have these industries that people flock to because that's where the money is, but it's actually illusory because there's so much competition and it's a lot harder than you think and there's actually not that much money in it. The money is in doing something totally different, right? Like Who wants to go into manufacturing nowadays, right? But that's actually, there's a lot of money to be made there. With my newsletter, the Daily Dirt Nap, I have subscribers from all different walks of life. I have hedge fund guys and people working in banking and sales and trading and stuff like that. But I also have guys in manufacturing. They're killing it. They're killing it. It's not easy, but they're making way more money than they could have in an industry like banking or tech because they're doing something totally unique.
Yeah. Within the context of finance and asset management, can you think of examples that would be playing the tuba?
I mean, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I would have said something like CLOs or something like that. But even that's become more commoditized now. But structured credit was probably an area that um, it was less liquid and there was more money to be made. Um, yeah, muni bonds, right?
Yep.
Like
Yep.
you can have a great career in muni bonds.
REITs in this day and age, maybe.
Yeah.
Um, you recently wrote about faith and skepticism in finance. And I think, the last couple of years, especially the people who've thrown, faith, just caution into the wind and just gone all in on, trends that are real trends that make sense, but that are, maybe a little frothy, a little bubbly. Those people have been rewarded quite well, and the skeptics have not. Um, what are your thoughts on faith versus skepticism? Do you think that, it'll turn back around and, where are you on this?
Well, I mean, what I said in the piece was there's a lot more money to be made in the markets with faith than skepticism. And everybody kind of fancies themselves a skeptic. Like everybody wants to, especially since The Big Short, right? Like ever since The Big Short came out, everyone's like, "Well, I'm gonna find the next Big Short, and I'm gonna short Lehman, and I'm gonna make 100%. Like I'm gonna. Everybody wants to be a short seller, and that is a very tough way to make a living. You know, human progress is 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. And there's a whole class of investor that tries to profit from the 2 steps back. And you can do that. It's just a lot harder, right? It's like I personally, like I really have a tough time like holding my nose and buying the upper right hand corner of the chart. Like that for me is very, very difficult. Like I could buy Nvidia here, maybe it goes up another 500%. I don't know, but like I have a tough time doing that. So but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do as well. And I think I'm just naturally a skeptic. And at the end of the day, I think you have to align your investment thesis with your true nature, with who you are. And there are people that are just, blind, like Kathy Wood has to be Kathy Wood, right? Peter Schiff has to be Peter Schiff. And, people who are in between. I think it's important for people to be it because no strategy works 100% of the time. And you need to have conviction to stick with it, to wait for the cycle to turn in your favor. And I think, people have a natural there's the market's this living breathing thing moving around. There are two sides always, and I think people have they fit into markets on a deep level, on a real level. They fit into certain areas, not everyone, and sometimes you find yourself for a good reason, but you find yourself in the place you don't belong. But I think a lot of people, when you see somebody investing in a certain way or in a certain asset class or strategy that is true to who they are by their nature, you can see that, you can identify that, and it's a beautiful thing to see. So anyway, a little bit of a ramble, but I think I am naturally skeptical. I think I've never been a short seller. I'm not a short seller right now. I've got long only funds. I've only had long only funds. But I love the shorts. I love to see, these guys find something that nobody else saw, say, aha, look, this is a fraud. Like there's something very cathartic for that, of that to me.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
so like, I
absolutely.
think I'm naturally skeptical. And in this market environment where it's just like, hey, don't worry about the PE. Don't worry about the valuation. Don't worry about, whether, this thing turns or pops. Like the way to make money in a bubble, I forgot who the quote was, way to make money is to ride it up, right? I mean, just go with it, man. Be like water, right? And there's a lot to be said for that. A little hard for me to let go and do that.
Yep, same for me.
Yeah. All right. I want to talk about another Substack that you wrote that I really loved, and that I also wrote. I wrote about, you were writing about it, which is letters to your 22-year-old self. And you have 10 items here, 10 things that you wanted to, like pieces of advice that you would give to, someone young and coming in specifically to the finance industry. I want to do all 10, but I'm going to put them out of order. And I want to start with my favorite, which is Hungry Like the Wolf. This is what you wrote. You said, you've had about 12 interns over the years, all very bright, very capable people. None of them were as hungry as I was. When I was getting started in my career, I read every single book on finance, over 200 of them. I subscribed to Barron's and the Wall Street Journal and read them religiously. I learned absolutely everything there was to know about finance. Other people were not so hungry. They went home at night and they would watch your shows. I was going to outwork you. I was going to outsmart you. And I've never met anyone like me who has that level of passion and intensity. I bring that level of intensity to writing too. I got my MFA in publishing, and I got my MFA, published 4 books, submitted hundreds of journals. And here's the thing about being hungry: it can't be taught. It absolutely cannot be taught. So if you're 22 and reading this and you think you might be slacking off, it's because you probably are. There will be time to relax later. It was great. I love that. And I think you kind of tapped into something that, is hard to articulate, but that, you can see in that some people have. I mean, I guess if I gotta, ping a question to you on it, I would say, how much of that do you think is just nature versus nurture, right? How much of that do you think was either cultivated in you or you yourself cultivated or manufactured in yourself versus how much of that you were just born with a fire in the belly and other people weren't?
Well, let me tell you that when I was younger, I didn't have as much direction. Um, I had the highest SAT scores in my high school class, and I was barely in the top 10% in grades. And I had the third highest SAT scores in my college class, and I graduated 91st out of 222. Okay. So I was not that motivated when I was younger. And it wasn't until I was about 22, 23 years old, and I started learning about investing that I said, this is really what I want to do. Like, this is what I really have a passion for. Um, and I just, like I said in the piece, like I read voraciously. I read everything. So Amazon was around back then. And you know how Amazon suggests books to you? Like you read one book, then it suggests other books. Like I just kept reading all the books that it suggested. I have a bookshelf off to the side over here with all the books that I bought from when I was younger. And look, I got to tell you, I am not that hungry nowadays. I'm 50 years old, and um, I like having a little bit of free time, but like basically for me to get a job on Wall Street, was not coming from a target school. I was not coming from an Ivy League school. I had terrible grades in college. I really, really, really had to hustle in order to get a job on Wall Street. And then even once I got a job on Wall Street, I had the worst resume of everybody in my associate class at Lehman, and I outlasted all of them and did the best. So, yeah, I don't know if it's nature or nurture. I don't know if it was taught, but I think once I was around age 23, there was like a switch that flipped in my head, and I just became the most relentless motherfucker of all time, you know. So
There was this documentary that came out a couple years ago about Michael Jordan and the Bulls, The Last Dance. It was one of the 40s. And in it, you saw, Michael Jordan's intense, insanely intense and relentless hunger, right? But there was a part that was really interesting, and it's still talked about to this day, where he had, I don't remember the exact details, but there was a player had a good game against the Bulls, and they were coming off the court, and the guy said to Michael Jordan, said like, good game. But in Michael Jordan's head, he heard that as the guy said something kind of obnoxious or some sort of a slight. And he took it as a slight. He said, this famous meme now, and I took it personally. And everyone who was around the story that they interviewed acknowledged that Michael Jordan kind of made it up. Maybe there's something to it, but he kind of made it up. But in his head, he took this as, this guy slighted me. This guy, had a better game than me. He thinks he's not, and I now have to go out and work my ass off to prove to everyone that I am Michael Jordan, and this guy's nothing. And then the next time they played, he put on, 50, 60 points and shut the guy down on defense. And it's this amazing thing that where like these, that hunger, like you can manufacture that. You can create stories and different things in your head to create this, this almost this funnel for yourself where, hey, here's where I want to get to. I know where I want to get to. I want to be successful on Wall Street. I want to be a writer. I want to be whatever I want to be. I'm going to create this narrative for myself that's going to force me to get there because you have that fire in the belly, because you can, right? Was any of that at play?
I don't know. I mean, I was really focused on myself. I wasn't really focused on myself relative to other people. I don't know.
So you're saying that you were just born and you dropped out of the womb and there you were with the fire in the belly to read finance books and to out hustle everyone. Like it was just a gift that was, like your handsome looks that you just, got from day one. Is that can't be.
Uh yeah, I think it could be. Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, okay. All right. Maybe so. And it's a hell of a gift. That's a hell of a gift to have. And I hope I've got kids and I hope, they have some of that too. I mean, it's, like you said in the book, you said it can't be taught. And it can't be taught, but I think it can be self-taught to an extent. I don't know, maybe not. It's hard to understand these things. It's hard to understand the deepest drivers and motivations that we have.
I talked about my interns. I've had like 12 interns over the years. There was one who was pretty motivated. Like, I mean, one of the things I didn't talk about in that piece, when I was going to business school, I was, I wanted to get a job on Wall Street. I got a job on the floor of the P Coast, which was the options exchange out in San Francisco. And I was still working for the Coast Guard and I was still going to business school part time. So my average day was I would get up at 3:45 and I would head down to the trading floor and I would work there until noon. And then I would come back to my Coast Guard job at 1 and I would work until 10. And then I would go home and study for school until about 1 or 2 in the morning. And I was sleeping like 2 hours a night. And I did this for like a year and a half until I got the job at Lehman. I was sleeping like 2 hours a night. And I I have not heard that story yet from anybody else. You know what I mean? But when I was interviewing at Lehman, I said, look, like this is what I am doing. This is how bad I want it, and it resonated with them. Like it did not resonate with all the other banks. I interviewed at a lot of places and there was a lot of places that didn't see the value in that. And I got to Lehman and I said, I will outwork anybody here. Right. So they hired me. So
I've seen it rarely, but I've seen it in my career from other people. When you see it, you notice it immediately. There's a guy named Robert Morocco, a good friend of mine, and when before I knew him, we were at I was at the New York Stock Exchange, and our team was hiring an analyst to come in, and we interviewed a whole bunch of really exceptional candidates. We had a number of exceptional candidates, but this one stood out, and he had that that fire in the belly, the chip on the shoulder, as they say, chips on shoulders, put chips in pockets. And it was just dripping off of him. And you could feel it. You could feel, the hunger. And this guy was going to outwork you. He was going to do everything he could to win. And, sure enough, here we are. It's going to be about 7 or 8 years ago now, maybe even more. And he's running ETFs for SIBO. This guy's got an incredible career in front of him, but it's infectious. Like you can see, and anyone that works with him can see, that hunger, that fire in the belly. And what I'm trying to get to and asking you about, whether that was manufactured or whether that, how do you take that? How do you bottle it? How do you package it? How do you give it to somebody else? How do you assign? How do you, create more of that within you? Because if that is the source for, the success that you've had and the success that we've seen other people have, understanding that and understanding how to, spark that and grow that and nurture that is so important. But it's like this, hard to define elusive thing that I think is not well understood, even by me, even perhaps by you. So like, I'm trying to get to the root of it and understand it.
yeah, I mean, so when I was in high school, the one thing I did put a lot of effort into was music, right? So I was in the marching band and I was drum major. And, that season I was drum major was just legendary. Like people still talk about it. And there was an instructor for the marching band. He was like a drill instructor. He He was a young guy. He was like 19 years old. His name was Jim Smith. And with the whole band in the room, he said, if you could take what Jared has and put it in a bottle and sell it, you would be rich, right? Which was the first time I ever really got a compliment like that. You know, I wasn't spending much time studying, but I was spending all of my time on music, and that's what I was really motivated to do. And so I don't know. I think I was born with it, honestly. So
Well, it's a hell of a gift. Let's run through a couple more of these, letters to your 22-year-old self. Politics matter.
yeah, I think a lot
This
of
is not
people,
politics, Democrats and Republicans. This is internal corporate politics, right?
yeah. Organizational politics. I think a lot of people naively believe that if they do the best job, they will get rewarded, right? So they're really focused on doing the best job they possibly can. And at the end of the year, when it's time to get paid, maybe they're disappointed, right? And just a quick story. Um, when I was at Lehman, 2007, I made $70 million for the firm. Okay. I got paid 850,000. The guy sitting next to me made $0 for the firm. He got paid 4 million. Okay. So that was the point that I realized that I was not managing my career very well. I was not managing politics. I was putting my head down and doing a really, really good job and making money. And the funny thing is that you would think that on Wall Street, it's a meritocracy, and how much like what you make for the firm is what matters, and that's how that should decide how you get paid. It's absolutely not. And I think people need to be cynical about this at a very young age, right? And the way to get paid is to be friends with your boss, like friends, right? Bosses don't pay people they don't like. They don't give bonuses to people they don't like. So you have to be personal friends with your boss. Doesn't mean you're not gonna do a good job. You can still do a good job, but it's really important to manage those relationships up, right, within the organization. So
Get some sleep.
I mean, that's easy. I sleep a crazy amount. Believe it or not, I sleep like 9 hours a night.
Now,
Too.
you told the story early in your career. You were sleeping 2 hours a night.
Yeah. These days I sleep 9 hours a night. And that is my superpower. Like when I get a lot of sleep, I have a lot of energy. I'm very efficient. My writing is a lot better. Like I get tons and tons of sleep. So
Sex is not that important.
Uh, it's it's not. Um, I mean, when you're in your 20s, you think it's the most important thing in the world, but it really doesn't matter for anything. Just focus on your job.
Generosity matters.
Yeah, that's kind of self-explanatory.
Pursue your dreams, sort of.
Um, I think I'm trying to think there was a story recently. Um, I can't remember. There was a young person I was talking to, and this person's dream was to do something that was not going to get him paid very much, right? And I'm like, that's okay. Like, you can work in theater, you can work in the arts, you can be a teacher, you can do all these things, but you have to know going into it that you're you're just not going to make that much money. You know what I mean? And creature comforts matter. They absolutely matter. Like we are sort of taught to be anti-materialistic, like to pursue your dreams, pursue your passions, like how much money you make doesn't matter. It absolutely does matter. Like it does matter. So if you make more money and you have some creature comforts, you will be happy. So
Do it without the rope.
yeah, like when I started my newsletter in 2008, I literally just walked away from a job at Barclays and, started the newsletter. And if it failed, I would be totally stuck. It had to succeed. It had to succeed, or else I was going to be broke, right? It was the biggest risk that I had ever taken in my entire life. And I did it without the rope. And the whole rope comment is from The Dark Knight Rises, right? Where Christian Bale, Batman, Bruce Wayne is in the pit prison, and he's trying to climb out of it, and he has his rope around him, and then the guy in the prison tells him to do it, and as the child did without the rope, you have to do it without the rope.
Don't drink or do drugs.
Yeah, that's self-explanatory.
Think big.
Yeah, a lot of people think really small. I have a nephew who is pretty focused on making incrementally small amounts of money. He works on Wall Street, and I'm like, dude, do you know how much money the people make that work around you? Like you have to think really, really big. So, I actually worked with a guy at Lehman who wanted to be the CEO, right? He wanted to be the CEO. Like, that's how big you have to think.
Think big is one of those tropes that people just say and people kind of dismiss. Oh yeah, I think big. But like, I think if people pause and internalize it, like the amount of effort it does to do big monumental things is often not that dissimilar in my experience to the amount of effort it takes to do, things that are orders of magnitude less ambitious. And I think we just have these mental blocks of, oh, well, like nobody would expect, or people were kind of waiting for permission, or they're waiting for a boss to say, hey, go build this, and so, or go do this. But I think thinking big is one of those things that really is self-limiting, self-limiting not to, and that, people should not just dismiss, oh, think big. Yeah. They should really internalize that and think about that. All right. The last one, communication skills are the most important thing.
Yeah. I mean, the people even on Wall Street, like the people on Wall Street who are the most successful are the people who can speak and write, right? The people who can communicate ideas. Like those are the people that are the most successful. But it's true in any industry. Like speaking and writing are highly, highly underrated. I'm actually going to my alma mater, the Coast Guard Academy, in a couple of weeks. And, it's an engineering school. It's a math school. They do have one humanities major. And, what I'm going to tell them was like, even in my Coast Guard career, it was my writing skills that made me do so well. Like it wasn't my math skills. Like, so.
Yeah. When people talk about who the best investor is, often you'll hear people talk about Howard Marks, or, people that might be good investors, but are primarily great writers or communicators.
Yeah.
All right. Well, look, thank you for coming on. Anything else got you fired up? Anything else you're working on?
I got another book coming out in November. It's a short story collection. So you're gonna love it. I love to come back on and talk about it when it comes out. It's gonna be really good.
Absolutely.
So,
let's do it. Until then, where can people find you?
I'm on Twitter at Daily Dirt Nap, but I'm not on there that much. If you want to subscribe to the Daily Dirt Nap, it's dailydirtnap.com. And the book is No Worries, How to Live a Stress-Free Financial Life. And you can get that on Amazon or anywhere else.
All right. Thanks again for coming on. Thanks to the audience. No worries to you, and no worries to everyone else listening. And we'll be back with a new show soon.
Thank you for listening to the Phil Bak Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please take a moment to drop a review. This show was published for entertainment purposes only and is not investment advice. Please contact a licensed professional before making any investments. Some of the securities discussed on the show may be owned by its participants. Opinions expressed on the show may not reflect those of their employers. Stay hungry and stay foolish.